Hi everybody, I think people are filtering in. I'm just going to start. I think more people might come in, but I'm going to start anyway because we've only got an hour, and I want to make sure that we make the most of it. Welcome to this Northern Writers Awards Roadshow, which is for anybody who's interested in writing for children. I'm Rebecca Wilkie from New Writing North, and I'm really looking forward to this hour-long event and this opportunity for us all to have a chat over the next hour. A few quick housekeeping points from me. Now, you should be able to turn on closed captions if you need to by clicking the CC button at the bottom of the screen. I can't see that CC button, so I'm slightly concerned that that is somehow not enabled. So let us know in the chat if you have any difficulty with that. For a more accurate sort of transcript of the conversation, you can follow the link to Otter AI, which my colleague Laura will post in the chat. And Laura is going to be manning the chat, so she's there to answer any questions that you might have along the way. If you've got anything you'd like to chime in on or sort of reflect on when we're talking, you can do that using the chat. So remember to select everyone rather than just host or panelists, so then everyone can see what you're saying. And then there's also the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of the screen. And if you've got a more formal sort of question, you can pop it there, and then at the end we'll have a look at them in the last 15 minutes and try our best to answer them. Yep, so I can see Laura's put the transcript to Otter, the link to the Otter transcript in the chat for anyone. So I'm delighted to introduce the panel who are here with us this evening to answer all your questions about writing for children and the Hachette Children's Novel Award, which is part of the Northern Writers Awards, which is run by us here at New Writing North. The first person I'm going to introduce is Isabel Garn, who is an associate literary agent at Curtis Brown. She has a background in children's publishing and is currently building her own list across picture books, middle grade, YA and graphic novels. James Harris is a writer who's based in Middlesbrough. He won the Hachette Children's Novel Award back in 2019 with his book The Unbelievable Biscuit Factory, and that came out last year, and he's got another book with Hachette that's going to come out later this year. Michael Mann is the author of Ghost Cloud, which is a magical middle grade adventure story set deep underneath a richly reimagined London, which is inspired by his coal mining granddad. And Michael is passionate about diversity in children's literature. He's another Hachette author. And his editor, Lena Mccauley, is here with us as well. So Lena is a senior commissioning editor at Hachette Children's Group, and she works with authors such as Michael, Jewel Parker Rhodes, and Anjali Roth. And before she joined Hachette, she worked with Scholastic on some really big brands, including The Hunger Games and Captain Underpants. So we've got some really, really brilliant people here today. Thanks all for coming along. So just to get started, some people had submitted questions to us in advance. And I've sort of grouped some of those together. As I say, we'll also look at the chat and see, check out any questions that kind of evolve as we carry on. The first question I'm going to ask, and I'm going to direct this at Isabel and Lena in the first instance, and that is, what's the best way to embark on the traditional publishing route? And a question we had was, has COVID affected the submission process at all? And do you want to start, Isabel?
Sure. Hi everyone, and really nice to be here. So I mean, I don't think COVID's really affected the submissions process very much from an agenting perspective. We ask people to submit. We used to actually have a portal on our website, but now we're moving towards more just sort of emailing. So if you check out an agent's page, they'll have their email address or like a particular submissions inbox, which they'll ask you to submit to. It kind of like varies. So sometimes there'll be, someone will ask for like 3 chapters or the first 10,000 words of your manuscript. And then generally speaking, like a cover letter and a synopsis, which details more of the long form plot of your book. And then if an agent reads and loves your submission, which hopefully they will, then they'll email you back and ask to read the whole thing. So that, I mean, that really is the best way. I think what advice I would give is really looking for an agent who really like matches, you know, what you feel your book is at its heart. Like if it's fantasy, you don't want to be approaching an agent who doesn't have any fantasy, and agents will have their bio and what they're kind of looking for, generally speaking, on their profiles. So like just finding an agent who you feel like is a good match for you, and then just making your pitch, like, I guess, quite specifically targeted towards that agent. And, you know, if they represent any writers whose writing you really love or admire, that's also a really great thing to sort of mention, because, you know, it sort of gives that you know, that feeling of like why they would be a good agent for you, because also you want to be matched with someone who's going to be a really great fit and really like get what your book is and get the heart of what your book is. And that's just like mutually, I think, really important. And that will be something that always comes up in a conversation with an agent too, like when an agent is wanting to sign you, just like checking that, you know, the editorial vision they have, for example, for a book is not sort of like completely diverging from what your vision for your book is, because you want to like have an agent who really, yeah, as I say, like gets the book.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Lena, as a publisher, would you say getting an agent was essential for most new writers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really beneficial, like in multiple ways, but for us, at least at Hachette, we generally only take submissions through agents. So we don't accept unsolicited submissions directly from authors. So it's really that filtering system.
Yeah.
And there are some publishers who do accept unsolicited submissions, but definitely for the widest reach, I feel like an agent is going to help you get to more publishers and kind of be able to know what publishers would be the best match for your book.
Yeah.
And then in terms of how COVID has changed things from the submissions perspective, the only thing I would say is that we often like to kind of meet authors if we really like a book and kind of think we're going to go for it. We often like to have a meeting to see kind of what they're like in person. And I think actually COVID, because video calls have become so much more prevalent, it's made it a lot easier to meet authors who, you know, aren't London based or aren't UK based, and still have like a Zoom meeting and have that be more of a normal thing. So I think in that way it's kind of widened things out, which is quite nice.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of what an agent actually does, and I'm aware that some people will be au fait with that, but I know some people won't. And actually, Isabel, could you explain exactly what your role is as a literary agent and how that works with when you're working with the writer that you take on?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, an agent is meant to be like the champion of an author, really. So like, an agent is there to basically help a writer through the publishing process. So it can be, I mean, it's multiple different things in a sense. So as Lena was saying, like an agent will have the best like idea of the editors who will be a good match for your book, and like which publishing houses to approach. But I mean, essentially, like when I take on a client, we'll have that discussion to sort of just check that we're, you know, aligned, and that you know, any editorial suggestions I have like sort of ring true to the author. So then we'll go through a kind of editing phase. You know, sometimes like books will be really polished and might like just need a couple of tweaks here and there, but I think, you know, getting the manuscript in like the best possible shape to give it the best chance when we do send it to publishers is important. So sometimes that can take a couple of rounds of going through things if, you know, I feel there's some like structural changes that would like benefit the book. And I guess it's like, you know, an author's been like living with this book for such a long time and like inhabiting this world, and like having a fresh pair of eyes on it can be like a really beneficial thing. So there's that kind of editorial side. Then once it's got to that stage where we feel, both the author and the agent feel it's, you know, really fantastic and polished, then the agent will put together a list of publishing houses to send it to. So like probably between like 10 and 15 publishers, maybe a few more. But again, like using their knowledge of, you know, having networked with different editors and having an idea of their different tastes, putting together a really curated list of like who will be good fits for your book. And then, you know, obviously, hopefully, like lots of editors will love it and come back and be interested, you know, but at that stage, then the agent's job, like once we've got offers, whether from one publisher or from multiple publishers, is to be like getting the best possible deal on the table for the writer, and kind of like having that industry knowledge to know like, you know, what's, you know, what sort of like, you know, going through the royalties, like looking through the contracts, so like handling all of that more kind of like financial and like contractual side, like on the author's behalf, so that they, you know, just have someone who's like an expert looking through that, so they don't have to be like going in not really understanding, you know, what contractual clauses are beneficial and which are less beneficial. So, you know, that's something that an agent will do on the author's behalf. And then after that process, it's then kind of like the process of like, you know, working alongside an editor and an author, and like just sort of, you know, being like, it's extremely collaborative, I would say, the whole process. And like when you have an editor on board and a publishing house on board, like the whole process is really collaborative, and it's the agent's task to just, you know, sometimes be just checking in and just making sure the relationship is going really smoothly, which like for the most part it really does. But just sort of being being a point person, so if the author does have any questions, they'll always know that someone's like there to answer any questions, and no question is silly, like an agent's just there to answer all your questions basically. So there's kind of like a few different stages to it, but really it's just to like, yeah, be the author's champion and just be making sure that their wonderful book gets out in the world and gets seen by lots of people, and that their publishing process is like a smooth one.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I'm getting a bit of a feedback actually. Can other people hear that? I don't know what. Oh, it's stopped now. Don't know, that was a bit, sorry, apologies, I'm not sure quite what that was. Just very quickly, Isabel, could you explain, a lot of people ask us at New Writing North to explain financially how you work with an agent. For example, you know, we will always say an agent will never ask you to pay them up front.
Yeah. No.
You take a cut, don't you, of their of any signing, any advance they may get from a publisher.
Yeah, so like no agent, no kind of, you know, reputable agent would ever ask you for any money up front, and it works on a commission basis. So essentially when your book is sold, that's when an agent also gets paid. So they'll take a cut of, you know, which is the commission essentially on that sale. So that will be for any upfront advance that gets paid by the publisher. They'll take a percentage of that.
And that percentage is usually at
15%.
Yeah.
So and then of any like subsequent royalties. So royalties come through when an advance basically earns out. So when book sales have essentially paid back that initial advance, then royalties will come through after that. So an agent would also take 15% of that generally. And also like for, you know, other deals, so for audio or for anything along those lines that get sold like adjacently to print rights.
Yeah.
And just to add very quickly, also just like to the last point, I guess an agent's role is also to like be championing like an author throughout their entire career. So not just like focusing on like your first book, but like, you know, if for some reason the first book doesn't sell, then you know, an agent will still be like, okay, well, let's look at what are the fantastic ideas you have, and like, you know, it's beyond the first book. It's like a relationship that you have that's like more about like building your career than just about one book.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Michael, could you tell us a bit about how you found your agent, how you found Isabel?
Yeah, I was just going to chip in and say, I think on the finance side, it's a bit alien when you first hear about, you know, taking percentage and commission. It's actually really reassuring as you go on, because you know your agent's interests are completely aligned with your own. You know that they're in with you for the long haul, and how, yeah. So I think that's actually, it's a really positive thing. How I found Isabel and how that happened. So I submitted to another competition called Undiscovered Voices, and then around that time I was one of the several winners of it, and around that time I started applying, sending emails to agents, including Izzy and Steph, who are kind of my joint agents, and and they sent me this lovely email back saying how excited they were about the book and they hadn't finished it, and I completely missed it in my inbox. And I got a week later, I got an email from them saying, "Did you get this email? We are really interested in this book." And obviously I was really excited. And so, and then I went in and met them, and we got on really well. And I think it's what Izzy was saying about, I did have another agent or two who was interested at that time, partly because of this competition. So I would say competitions like this are really helpful, because they kind of raise your profile as an author, even if you don't win, if you're shortlisted or all that kind of stuff. And so to help me decide, I kind of just had further conversations, and I felt my phone, I should have turned that off. It's my mum, it's my birthday today. Happy birthday to me yet. So Izzy basically and Steph, I did feel they really got my book, and they had ideas for kind of editorial suggestions about the world and about the length and all those things, and they just really resonated. And I also could just see myself working with them. So yeah, so I felt they were the best.
That's really, really good to know. And James, do you want to chime in? Do you work with an agent?
I've got an agent now, but at the time that I won the award, I didn't. And I won the award, and I thought that, right, brace yourself, here they come. And it didn't happen. And I kept sending off the Biscuit Factory stuff to agents, and it's a search. It's like any other part of the publishing business. It is finding the person, the gatekeeper, that actually responds to what it is that you do, and it may take a while. And the more I don't know, maybe personal or niche your stuff, the longer it'll take to find that person. So it was after the Biscuit Factory was published that I found my agent, and I'd already sold a second book to Hachette at that point. So like the work of sort of pitching books with an agent hasn't really begun for me yet. We're sort of working on pitches. It just took a lot of sending off to people, and a lot of people sending back saying, I like it, but I don't know what I'd do with it, or variations on, what is this you've sent me? Was this deliberate? And just eventually just finding the one person that said, I've been waiting for this. I've been looking for exactly what you're doing. This is really exciting to me. So yeah, it's great. And it's a great relationship, like trying to work on a pitch, and I'm sort of sending ideas, and she's saying, this is a really great idea, you should write 3 chapters. And I'm like, do I have to? And she's like, yes. So it's good to be steered through the process in that way. And to just have someone to write for, at least to start with, because I think for me as a writer, I came into it through wanting to make people laugh. Like everything I've done and said since I was 5 has been sort of geared towards that. And just finding the one person that will read your stuff and give you some feedback on it just makes writing easier, I think. And it's easier to motivate yourself to know that there is someone waiting.
Yeah, to sort of guide you. Well, Victoria in the chat has just actually said, any tips on how to pitch to an agent and what to do or don't do? So everyone has got different experiences in this Zoom room with that. What would you say? Well, James, if you've literally just gone through this process, what do you think really ended up working for you in terms
finding
of
the right person in the end?
So researching who to send it to.
Well, that's a really useful thing to do as part of, like, I work with a company called Writer's Block in Middlesbrough, so we've met a lot of agents, and what I have found is you ask 10 agents what they want to see in a submission, there's going to be variations at the very least in what they like from a submission and what they like from a synopsis and what they like from a cover letter. They will all give you variations on advice, but what I would say is agents are all quite chatty, and they will have done interviews online. Their pages on their agency websites will give you a sense of what they're looking for. They may give you a sense of what they like in a submission, of what they like in a cover letter. If not, they'll have been doing interviews out there. They'll be sort of interviewed with blogs and stuff. You can research each specific agent and get a sense of what they like to hear from authors. So there's no harm done in sort of doing that research, because you do only get one chance to make a first impression. And so the more you can target your sort of approach in as personal a way as you can to each specific agent, the better. It's not always possible. So I would also say just be like nice and professional in your email. Don't let too many psychological issues leak out.
Don't sort of overshare too much. Yeah. So Isabel, what do you look for in a submission? What on a very basic level, what would you expect to see in that email attachment?
In a pitch, I guess. I mean, yeah, I would really echo what James has said. I think, reading like the rubric, I guess, on the website, because I think, if people have asked for specific things or don't want specific things, they will just say it on their website page. So yeah, just doing a bit of research into that. I think also like being as specific as you can, like as I said at the beginning, like I'd get so many submissions that are just like, dear sir, and then it sort of like goes on from there, and it's just completely nothing to do with like anything really that I would.
Very impersonal.
Very impersonal, very generic. So I think like, being like personalizing it, sort of you know, if, as I said earlier, if they have authors who you read their work and you like, or you would sort of, you know, to kind of fit in a sort of similar-ish space to like the book that you're writing, that's great to name. I think also just like brevity as well, like in a synopsis particularly, and in a cover letter is great, because like, yeah, again, I've seen synopses that can be like sort of 5, 6, 7 pages long. For me, like I would always read the synopsis last. I know, like as James says, like every agent is a bit different with this. I tend to use a synopsis to like be like, where is this going, if I've read the sample and I really love it.
So would you normally ask for the 3 opening chapters? I know traditionally was what agents wanted to see. Is that still the case, would you say?
I think so. I mean, we tend to say that or the first 10,000 words, because like sometimes people will just have really short chapters, and then it seems a bit mean to be like, you know, just let me the first 3. So yeah, that or 10,000 words. And yeah, but I would say like keep your synopsis like as brief as possible, like just, you know, give a really good flavor of where the story is going, but we don't need to like know everything in that synopsis. It can be quite brief. And then the last thing I would say is for the cover letter, what I would really like to say is like good practice to do as well is to just, if you can try and like distill like the essence of what your novel, I know it's so hard to do, but like if you can pitch it almost like in like 1 or 2 sentences, that's just really helpful. And I think it's good practice to like get into that sort of like frame of mind of like how you would pitch it, like what do you think, what is the heart of your novel in its essence, like, and that can be just a really like eye-catching thing to have at like the start of a cover letter, to be like, my book is like, this is how I would describe it, this is what I feel like it is at its heart, in terms of like genre, in terms of like the main characters, and that sort of like really headline, like really exciting, interesting sort of, you know, opening, I think just helps to sort of catch someone's attention.
Yeah, I think I remember my first job was working for a literary agent, which was a million years ago now, but as the person that had to read all of the submissions, it's also just remembering, like, make this something that someone wants to read, make it a pleasant experience, type it nicely, space it nicely so that it's really easy to pick up and read. I remember constantly being asked, well, actually, I like chapters 11, 14 and 17 more than the first 3 chapters. Well, that's going to make no sense to anyone if they're reading them out of context, is it? You know, the first 3 chapters are how you hook people, and it is just a much more pleasant experience as a reader to kind of get to know a writer and their books. There's also those just kind of really simple things, I think. And you know, the people reading the submissions have got a great big pile, so you need to do something to really kind of make their lives a bit easier when they're reading everything. But I think all of that's really helpful. Really helpful, Isabel. A question that comes up a lot, a slightly different one, is about picture books. Actually, Lena, you might be able to speak to this. It's about whether you need to present a picture book text with illustrations, or whether the publisher finds your illustrator for you. Now, I know the answer, but I think it would be interesting for you to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the short answer is no, you don't need to, you know, have found the illustrator, and that's definitely something that the editorial team would do, and would that's part of their job, to find the right illustrator to match the text. Yeah, I don't actually work on picture books myself, but I know that that's how it works.
Yeah, it really does. And similarly, if you're an illustrator, you can also submit as an illustrator. You don't have to have a text. Certainly writers, really famous pairings like Axel Scheffler and Julia Donaldson had never met before Macmillan paired them together. Quentin Blake and Roald Dahl, you know, loads of the really famous people that work together very rarely met, actually, or meet. It's something that publishers do. So if you have a picture book text, please don't worry about having to do mock-up illustrations or find somebody local to illustrate it for you. Like, don't worry about that. I'm going to move on to some of the more sort of practical questions that we've had from writers. Someone has asked if they can submit the same book that they entered last year for the awards, and the answer to that is yes, you can, as long as you weren't the winner. It's not you, is it, James? You're not trying to enter again?
I entered twice.
Okay, so there we go. Yeah, so you can. And actually, James, could you talk us through your experience sort of entering the Northern Writers Awards and that journey?
Well, I'd entered the Northern Writers Awards the year previous. I guess that would be the 2018, with the same book, slightly different, but the same 3 chapters and a broadly similar synopsis, and had got nowhere. Absolutely just thank you for your interest kind of thing. Didn't get shortlisted or anything. And the time sort of ticked around, and I thought I'd have maybe come up with something new and exciting and better in the year between awards, and I hadn't. And it was around about January, and I had just embarked on a rewrite of The Biscuit Factory. I'd left it for a bit and had some thoughts and decided, right, I can do a rewrite of this. And so I was planning through a rewrite, and I just thought, well, it's January and I don't have any other books, so I'll submit the same book again, but I'll just put something a bit mad on the first page. That basically what I did, is just put something a little bit interesting or insane. Like, you think your first chapters are all set up, this is your character's life before the mad thing happens, but why not have a little intrusion, a little sort of foreshadowing of that really early on in the book, just to hook someone? And that's pretty much what I did. And then it was like literally the worst thing ever, because I got shortlisted and I was asked to submit the the full manuscript from 2 weeks from getting that email, and I hadn't finished. So I had a mad 2 weks. I kind of knew what I was going to do, but I still had half the book to do, and got that in. Thought, well, that's brilliant, I'm shortlisted, there's absolutely no way I'm going to win. And that was my attitude all the way through. It's great, not a chance I'm going to win. And then I got the email one morning just saying, oh, just don't tell anyone, but you've won. And I kind of kept sort of putting the laptop down and having a little walk around the room, and then going, picking up the laptop again. I'm pretty sure that says I've won. And it turned out I had won. And I think the lesson to be drawn, there's a couple of lessons to be drawn there. Just submit, just enter. And if you didn't get anywhere last year, enter this year, because it's different judges. You don't know who's going to be in that room. There is someone out there who your stuff is going to make their heart sing. They might not be in the judges' room this time. They might not have been last time. You just don't know. Just keep going. Any opportunity, fling something in. And because it's a mixture of sort of hard work and luck, but you increase your luck by throwing your stuff at as many opportunities as possible. And that was kind of my experience. There's no way I should have won, but can't take the prize off me now. It's done. But write what delights you. Gussy up your first 3 chapters. Make them your favorite 3 chapters of anything you've ever written. Keep going back. That's all you've got, is those first 3 chapters. They're your stall window. Do as much as you can to make them brilliant. And in your synopsis, just write a synopsis of the best book you could possibly write. It doesn't even have to be the one that you think you're capable of writing. Just write that synopsis to sing. Sell the sizzle in that synopsis, and just hope and pray that you don't get shortlisted, because then you have to write the book.
When I second James, I would also say I submitted lots of competitions and got nothing back. And I don't think, I mean, there were things that weren't good with the book, but I think it is also, you've just got to keep trying. I read somewhere you should be counting the number of rejections you're getting, and you should be like kind of almost celebrating them, because unless you're putting it out there, you're never gonna get that win or get picked. And I also felt that every time I did that, and I had a couple where I would get a deadline again, you have to submit the full one in 2 weeks, and I would fix the novel as best I could and then submit it, and it wouldn't get it. And I think those deadlines are really useful as writers. I think it's only in those moments of deadlines that I would sort of step back from reworking the pointless chapter and focus on the bits that really needed fixing, or really think, actually, what do I need to fix in this opening that is going to get them interested? So again, I think you've just got to submit and risk it.
Yeah. And on a really sort of practical level, how do you, what research, to find the competitions in the first place? What sort of networks were you going to sort of discover that? Were you doing a creative writing course or something like that? How did you develop your networks kind of around that?
I did lots of courses. I was the kind of course junkie, I would say, but I don't know if that's very, very appropriate. But yeah, I did lots of courses. I started off with some adult short story ones, and I moved on to some children's books, and I did a course with Curtis Brown as well. That was fantastic.
Right.
And City Lit, I had a fantastic one with that, and that helped me build a bit of a writing network. And then I would, you just sort of you meet people along the way who are doing it, and I usually find out about course competitions from then. Or I didn't actually use Twitter until after, but I did find a couple of blogs, and I can't remember, Paul McVeigh, I think he had a blog where he used to list all the competitions. And so I would go on there every now and then and check that. So you might be able to find your own sources. I don't know about you, James.
Yeah, well, I mean, I liked the idea of writing courses, but never knew where to find them particularly. And so I started doing my own, which is a really good way of learning like the nuts and bolts of writing, because you're suddenly running a writing course. So you have to read lots of books about writing, and then you have to sort of digest them in such a way that you can coach other people in writing. So that helped me a lot. But all the way through, I knew fine well there's no way I was ever going to get a career in writing, but I hate writing, but you hear that a lot from authors. But what I love is performing, and I love making people laugh. So all the time from when I first started, I used to make sort of short films from about 15, 20 years ago, to do sketch comedy, just writing stuff that had a use for me and that I could throw in front of other people. That's what kept me going, I think. As much as writing courses, the more you do stuff and think it's brilliant, and then look at it again a year later and go, oh, I thought that was brilliant. How interesting. I'm a bit better than that now. And then you just learn, and you not just learning the nuts and bolts of writing. And I can't stress, like, learning structure is so useful. But learning to write yourself, to write through all the influences, to write through all the stuff that you love from other people, until you find your blend and mix, your sort of soup mix of all your influences, so that you know that when you sit down to a page, what you're writing is your version of these characters doing this thing. And I think just writing something every day, like I say, whether it be a little short flash fiction or a sketch, or just whatever it is, as much as going on courses and meeting other people and stuff like that, going online to find those opportunities. But in between times, don't just be chasing that. Find the thing that makes you want to sit down and write something for yourself. I think one of the biggest bits of advice I give is, like, write for yourself, write to delight yourself, because on balance, you're most likely to be the only person that reads it. So you might as well write something that you love.
Yeah. And that will shine through as well, I think.
Yeah, and then you get lucky and find the other weirdo that responds to your weirdo nonsense.
Yeah. So do you set yourself a word limit, James, a daily word limit when you're writing?
I do. These days I try, and I've got a program called Scrivener, which is really nice. It has like daily targets, and you can set, I want to write 800 words. But what I also have is a partner who is very disapproving if I don't write. And when I was writing The Biscuit Factory, and there was breaks and stuff, it took me a couple of years to get to a decent level with it. I would spend a lot of time sitting in cafes pretending to write, wandering around parks, just thinking, what am I doing? This doesn't work. The plot doesn't work. The idea of me as an author doesn't work. And coming home and saying, yes, it's gone quite well, actually. So there's a lot of deceit involved. But in the end, it has to be you motivating yourself. And what I have discovered is, if James writes 800 terrible words today, James tomorrow will thank James in the past for doing that rubbish work, because James in the future can chip away at that and make it just a little bit better. And then James 2 weeks later can go back in again and make it even better. But you can't do that unless you do. This poor James today does the sort of the digging through the crap mines to get something that at least vaguely resembles something.
Yeah. And Michael, do you have word limits? I know that both of you have day jobs as well, and I think people will be really interested to hear about how you manage that on a daily basis.
So I wrote Ghost Cloud when I was teaching, and so the teaching days I wouldn't get any writing done, but at the weekends and half terms and summer, then I would be really give myself proper word limits, because I had to get it done on those days. And so, and I'm a bit, I think I had like a minimum of 300 to 600 words, because I found I kind of beat myself up enough as it is without setting them too high. But I would, echo what James said, is that it was nicer for me to exceed my target and than it was to like fall short. And that I thanked myself the next day if I did it. I think the other thing I had, like, that I found a few other things that were motivational. At some point, I remember having like a post-it on my laptop which had the cumulative word count, so I could see myself going up, because even you could see yourself climbing into the thousands and the tens of thousands and so on. And then I even had an Excel table at one point where I like had each chapter and was like, oh, I've done this many words in that. And so whatever it is to sort of, for me, it's about kind of encouraging and reminding yourself that you're making progress, even if it's a really long haul. And yeah, and I suppose then the only other thing I would say, it takes a long time to edit. So then, when you're editing, it's a whole different game where you're not actually about, often, as Lena will be able to tell you, my challenge is to cut back my words,
right?
Which is really hard, because you're often fine tuning things, and there again, your different strategies. It might be that you're trying to cut a certain 100 number of words each day, or that you are cutting a few chapters, or whatever it is. But I think it's about kind of reminding yourself of the progress you're making, and tracking that in some way, and telling people about it, whether it's your partner or your writing buddies, just to sort of, because they usually cheer you on and keep you going.
That's really good advice. I have a question which is about what point in your journey as a new writer did you give yourself sort of permission to call yourself a writer? Because this is something James and I were chatting about earlier. I think for a lot of new writers, it's a real struggle to sort of give themselves permission to actually say, I am a writer. What point was that for you, Michael?
I said it in the cafe to some people the other day, yesterday, and I still felt a little bit like I'm a teacher and I'm a writer, like just under my breath, and they're like, oh, what did you say? So I think in my head, my own, there was at some point when I think I got the publishing deal. At some point over that year, I think in my head I gradually thought, oh no, I am a writer, and I'm carving time, and I went part-time after I got the deal to make time to write the second book. And so at that point, no, I'm writing like every week, and this is a real big part of my life. And so I think I accepted it myself then. But I do think it takes a while for you to be able to say it to people in a way that is confident and doesn't sound like you're kind of, I don't know, to me, it still sounds a little bit kind of grandiose to say you're a writer. So yeah, I don't know when I will fully grow up and accept it.
And how about you, James?
Can't do it. I understand, and I tell everybody that the first thing you should write is I am a writer on a badge, and wear that badge because you've written. But I can't do it. Like my partner, like it doesn't matter who comes around, like the postman, he's a children's writer, but if people ask me, the thing is, up to now, like my money is kind of, technically I'm an actor, which is worse for telling people, and filmmaker. I tell people I'm here in a hotel room in Hull because I'm about to do tomorrow. I'm going to do some drama-based behavioural safety training for some construction workers. So I'm in health and safety. That's where I'm at. I know I should be able to say I'm a writer, but I just find I can't do it. I can't do it. In my head, oh, I'm a writer.
Yeah.
Later on, I'm going to find one of the fluffy white towels and just swan around like I imagine a writer would. F. Scott Fitzgerald in a fluffy towel with a martini or something. But when people ask me on the street, I just, oh, what have you written? That's because that's the next question. They say, oh, you wouldn't have read it.
I think that's really interesting that you both kind of said that, and I think it might be a slight British thing as well, that kind of self-deprecating, not one. I mean, Lena, you've lived in both America and Britain, so you've probably seen sort of both sides. But I think so many people we meet through New Writing North, there is real issues about giving themselves permission to be writers and feel like they're writers, and actually I think that's one of the things the Northern Writers Awards and many of the other prizes are great for, because I think it does give that sort of validation to people. Now I've had a few more sort of practical questions pop through in the Q&A. This one is for Lena or Isabel, and that's, if it's a short children's book, maybe 5,000 to 10,000 words, how would that be pitched? So it's presumably because there isn't that much narrative to go on.
I mean, in terms of pitching to an agent, I mean, obviously the word limit, like if your book is less than 10,000 words, that's absolutely fine, and send through the whole thing, and that's great. And I mean, I guess like it depends so much, like project to project. I mean, if it's something of that word length, I would tend to say was like a bit more into a kind of young fiction bracket. So I guess like again, like other advice that I would always give is like reading widely in the genre that you're writing in. So you know, it's not always helpful to like have comparison titles, and I don't look for those always in pitches, but like if it's helpful, you know, if you feel like your book sits alongside a particular, you know, other book that you've read that's in that kind of like younger fiction space, it's worth mentioning. But also, I mean, like, you know, I think it's the same in a sense, like you're just pitching your story, and like, you know, as I said before, like that sort of you know, 2-sentence, 3-sentence like pitch of like what the book is, who you think it will appeal to, who the main characters are, like what's the adventure they're getting up to. Like just, it's really the same, I'd say, like no matter what word count your book is. But I guess it's just, you know, feel free, obviously, if it's under 10,000 words, don't like constrain yourself to like the first 3 chapters then, because you'll want to give, you know, the whole thing in that case.
Okay. Anything do you need to
All
add?
that.
Okay, great. Next one from Helen is, if the story is set abroad, in Australia, for instance, should you approach overseas literary agents?
I would say no, because I think it's always good to have a literary agent like in the country that you're living in, generally speaking. I mean, you know, at Curtis Brown, we have like, there's Curtis Brown Australia, and there's also, we work with a company called ICM, who are our sister agency in the US. So when we are like selling a book, we'll be talking to like our counterparts like in different territories, and like we have a rights team who'll be selling internationally as well. So there's people with like different areas of expertise like within an agency, or like they'll partner with other agencies that work in different territories who like have you know, and like innate market knowledge of that particular territory, and will be best placed to do that. But I would say like it's always, I think it just makes sense like to have a literary, like if your book is set in Australia, that doesn't mean that like, you know, it won't appeal to an audience anywhere. So I think just for like practical reasons, it makes more sense to like have your primary agent be someone who's, you know, in the same country as you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great, thank you. I can see Andy in the chat, Andy Rafael in the chat said, I was lucky enough to win this year, and my advice is to keep checking your junk mail, as I nearly missed the full manuscript request. And I also reiterate James's excellent advice to just enter, just do it. So that's great. Lydia says, do you think it is absolutely better to submit the first 3 chapters rather than skipping chapters, so that an important or exciting part of the narrative is included, assuming context is given? I would always say the first 3 chapters, because if the first 3 chapters aren't good, it doesn't bode well for the rest of the book, does it really?
You know, when I'm
Just
reading a
put
submission,
something
I'm not going to
exciting.
read, you know, chapters 1, 17 and 33. I'm going to read chapters 1, 2, and 3. And if it hasn't caught my interest by then, you know, I might not read more. So
just edit. You can tell yourself that you'll change it back afterwards, but edit your first bit of book so something gobsmacking happens in the 3rd chapter. End it on a cliffhanger. Just trim out as much as you can. As I say, you can tell yourself, I'll go back to the way it was originally, but just have something astonishing happen in those first 3 chapters. Just get to it. Don't bore us. Get to the chorus, as Roxette wisely said.
I think it's
many
like
years ago.
It's worth thinking about it as like trying to recreate the experience that like you have when you walk into a bookshop, in a sense. Like you pick up a book, like you'll be looking at the first chapter or the first few pages of that, and you want to be like caught, you want to like be swept away by it. So I think it's like recreating that like for an agent or for a publisher or for whoever, because like I think even if you do give like context that kind of like explains what's happened in the middle, like it's just not like, it's not the writing, and that's not really what's going to be interesting us, because we've got that anyway in the synopsis. So we can see, like reading your synopsis, that like X character, you know, dies dramatically in chapter whatever, but like it's like the writing that's going to be capturing someone, like even more so than like the action, I think.
Yeah, I think that's good. Back to the Q&A, a lovely question from Alex, who asks everybody, what's your favourite classic children's book, and what's your favourite children's book from the last 5 years? Which I think is a gorgeous question. Do you want to start, Lena?
Sure. So, I mean, the book that I listened to it on tape like every night before I went to sleep for probably about 5 years was Charlotte's Web. That's my favorite like book from when I was a kid. And then it's quite hard to choose book from the last 5 years. I feel like I can't choose any of my own authors because they're all my favorites. But a book that I loved and didn't end up acquiring went elsewhere was Amari and the Night Brothers. It was a great, just like magical adventure. So that was one of my favorites that I didn't manage to publish myself.
Thank you. And how about you, Isabel?
It's hard to choose. Yeah, my favorite classic is probably either a Joan Aiken, like The Walls of Willoughby Chase, or it would be Diana Wynne Jones' Howl's Moving Castle. I think I just loved both of those, and like, yeah, inspired my love of fantasy really, reading all Diana Wynne Jones' books. My favorite contemporary book, hard. I mean, yeah, aside from books I work on, obviously, I recently loved Felix Ever After, which was published by Faber, and that was a book that was initially published in America and then published over here, and it's like just such an incredible love story, and gives you lots of feels, and has like a trans character at the center, but like it's about like the love story, and it's wonderful. Like I braced through it. It's great. Really recommend it.
And Michael, how about you?
I find favourites really hard, but the one that came to mind initially was I love The Witches by Roald Dahl. I love all of Roald Dahl's books, but I just it still kind of blows my mind. Like, it's so dark and so fun, and the child ends up a mouse. Not to ruin the ending, sorry, but the child, ends up a mouse at the end is not good. I don't know. It was just so brilliant, I thought. And they have these long chats with the grandma, and I think it's really exciting. And I read it as a teacher to the kids I taught, and you could see them just switch on when you read it, and and there's a line about your teacher could be a witch too, and they were like, oh. So I just think it's great. And then recently, again, really, really hard, and the one that I really loved recently this year was Jonathan Stroud's The Scarlet and Brown, The Outlaw Scarlet and Brown, is that what it's called? It was so exciting, and the world was amazing, and I just like hung on every page, and I still remember really good, really amazing scenes in it now. So that's a great one.
And how about you, James?
I suppose as a kid, Roald Dahl definitely. Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator I loved because it was kind of sci-fi and weird. Fantastic Mr. Fox I really loved, and one day I will eat a donut pumped with pate, because I know those guys are disgusting, but don't you want to try that? And in terms of more recent, I read a book recently that was a classic from kind of my childhood, but I'd never read it, which was The Dark is Rising, which it was absolutely captivated me and made me deeply nostalgic for a childhood I never had. And there was something about the Christmas that was described in The Dark is Rising that I've just come to as an adult. That was just amazing. I'm really looking forward to rereading that, I think. And in terms of more contemporary stuff, I read a book, Mort the Meek, very much enjoyed, by Rachel Delahaye, because it's kind of a bit pratchety, a bit medievally, and it's got a really nice message at the heart of it. The sort of the main character is a pacifist, and I'm very much into books where nothing is solved by punching or fighting.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think for so many people, of course, their favourite children's book is actually their favourite book, because it's often the book that has meant that they've carried with them for the longest. Certainly that would be the case for me. My favourite children's book is literally just behind me. It's this my beloved Anne of Green Gables, which is like my TV tie-in edition from, I guess, like 1989 or something, but it's still my favourite book of all time. If anyone asks me, I'll always pick that over anything else. And I think that's why actually writing for children is such a wonderful thing to do, because you're actually writing the books that a lot of people will carry with them for their whole lives, and will really have a really transformational effect in a way that I'm never quite sure reading as an adult has quite the same impact. But thank you, everyone. That was lovely. And as we just sort of finish up, we have a few just sort of really nice sort of questions, sort of wider questions, and about sort of themes and what's popular in children's books at the moment. What do you all think are the themes that are either really underrepresented at the moment, or the voices that are really underrepresented? And what do you think is doing very well at the moment? What do you think is selling very well? Lena, would you like to take that one?
Yeah. So I feel like middle grade, like 8 to 12, is kind of selling really well in general, and especially like magical middle grade. It feels like there are tons of magical middle grade series and using kind of magic to tackle themes that, you know, kids are approaching in their real lives in kind of a more accessible and safe way, which is really nice. And I mean, I think we're always talking about just more diversity in books, in terms of, you know, all sorts of different types of diversity, whether that's, you know, where somebody's from, or kind of their race, or their sexuality, or their class background. And I think that is just something that, you know, we haven't tackled enough yet. So just, yeah, more kind of different voices.
Yeah. And Michael, I know you're really passionate about diversity in children's books. And do you feel like you've noticed sort of some shifts in the last few years, or do you think there's still quite a long way to go?
There's definitely been more and more, and there's some really, the CLP did a really nice study showing there's lots of progress. But as a teacher, even in class, you know, there are certain kids who would read magical adventures and there wouldn't be that much diversity there, and it is filtering through. You've got Amari and the Night Brothers and Ghost Cloud. My book's got a half Indian kid like me, you know, so I think it is getting there, but I do think there's room for more diversity in all across the different genres, not just in the issues in books that explicitly explore diversity, but almost diversity as something, you know, like anyone could be a hero of any kind of book. So yeah, I think that would be a lovely thing to see more of. And as you said, Lena, not just race, but all sorts of different representation. Yeah,
I think that's really good to hear. And how about you, Isabel? From an agenting point of view, is there anything that you're seeing a lot of at the moment? Are there any sort of genres or themes that you're really feeling like you're receiving a lot of at the moment?
I mean, yeah, it's hard to tell, and I always find sort of like questions about trends, I guess, a bit difficult to answer. And I think almost like in terms of sort of like, people often ask like, oh, what are the trends? Like, is there anything I should be writing specifically? And I just feel like not really, because you should be writing what you want to write, and you should be writing the kind of book that you want to write with the kind of characters that you want to write, and like not feeling you need to like, you know, impose any like false categories on yourself in a sense, because like you, yeah, write the book you want to write. I mean, I guess like, again, it gets filtered because I have very particular like tastes, and I love fantasy and sci-fi. So I tend to get more submissions that are like fantasy based. I guess, you know, I would personally, I would love to see more sci-fi. And I think like, I guess often sort of, you know, genre fiction can be, again, slightly sort of like pigeonholed or categorized, or like people feel, you know, there's less sort of acceptance of like writing a particular kind of book. Like, you know, I think sci-fi like gets a bad sort of reputation often because people sort of view it as like that very like, you know, I guess mid-century like Arthur C. Clarke is like the one way to write sci-fi, or you have to write like a huge space opera with lots of aliens. And actually I would love to see more books that kind of like cross over genres and like explore a bit of like fantasy with a bit of like a sci-fi twist. Another book that I loved recently was oh, I'm going to completely forget the name now. I think it was called The Other World, and it's like based in our world, but like it's got sort of like you know, physics and like, you know, the sort of idea of like there being parallel worlds and being able to kind of like time travel, but like it's very squarely based in like a very recognizable reality. And I think, yeah, just like not feeling like constrained, or not feeling like, you know, you need to sort of write within very strict sort of like parameters, otherwise you're not going to get an agent interested, or you're not going to get a publisher interested. And yeah, I'd love to see sci-fi submissions. So that's sort of, yeah, my where I'm from.
And are there any, James, have you noticed any themes or sort of things that seem to be very popular at the moment? You know, you write very funny books. which I think
Thank
there's
you.
always a place for.
Well, I think as a straight, white, cisgender, heterosexual 50-year-old man, like there's some battles that aren't mine to fight at the moment. And there's publishers and agents that need to find the people with the lived experience to be able to sort of put diversity front and center, so we know that on the cover of each book someone is represented in some book. That is, it's not for me to write in that sort of direct way, but because I love comedy, I love fantasy, I love science fiction, because I will watch the heck out of Battlestar Galactica, and then halfway through realizing that actually what I'm watching is a dissection of the occupation in Iraq. I will watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer and then realize each episode is telling me something about the world, coming at it from a different angle, where you can enjoy it as a romp, you can enjoy it as an adventure. It's got monsters and stuff, but wait, think, what is it telling us below the surface? So I think, yeah, for me, I don't read a lot of contemporary children's fiction. All I can do is that thing of like, write to delight yourself. What is bothering me about the world? Who do I know I can sort of write and empathize with and put at the center of it? Who can I put around them? And this mad threat, like monsters in the biscuit factory, on the next one, like mind control aliens in a school, right? That's cool, but what's it really about? And how does that also represent actual lived problems that kids have? And I think for me, like the one genre thing that I think is really important at the moment for kids is hope at the end. It's a weird time to be alive, but it must be a very weird time to be a kid. And what I like to write about is there's mad stuff happening. The grown-ups are ignoring it. There is hope. We can do stuff, whether it is to fight aliens, to fight monsters, or to just kind of save the world. Hope, I think, is my genre. That's what I want to see more of.
That seems like a really perfect moment to finish, actually, on that sort of hopeful note. Thank you so much to all four of you for taking your time out of your evenings to do this. I found it really interesting, and I can see from the comments that lots of other people found it really interesting too. Everybody check out the New Writing North website for information about how to enter the Northern Writers Awards, and feel free to drop us an email at the New Writing North office. For those panelists that haven't got the chat enabled, look, we're having lovely comments from people just saying thank you so much, and happy birthday, Michael.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Michael. Are we all going to sing?
No, it never works on Zoom.
Well, we'll leave Michael to go off and have his birthday tea, and yeah, so thanks so much. And because this is a webinar, it's now going to end very abruptly, and there's no way around it, but thank you very much, everybody, for coming along. Thanks. Bye bye.